Good evening and welcome to the City Council meeting of April 22nd. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mayor Harkey,
Here.
Vice Mayor Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Councilmember Rowe.
Here.
Councilmember Ellis.
Here.
Councilmember Orlando.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be led by Pastor Christine Stockson, our Pledge of Allegiance by Vice Mayor Mark Stewart. Pastor.
Gracious God, we give thanks for Mayor Harkey and the City Council members and all who work for the good of the Chandler community. Especially during this time of the pandemic, I give thanks for their leadership. As we enter into this council meeting, give our leaders ears to hear the concerns of the community. May they discern what is best for Chandler, keeping in mind the needs of the most vulnerable. We ask you to continue to bless this community and our lives together. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Pastor. Council, I do have some speaker cards on the item number 3 that are in support of this. So was one person, I know I had a conversation, is there going to be one person that just represents this, or? All right, and is that going to be David or Stephen? Stephen, great. So we have a speaker card on item number 3. Steve, come up and state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
My name is Steve Smith. Take this off. My name is Steve Smith. I live at 3885 East Carob Drive in Gilbert, Arizona, but my business, Chandler Air Service, is located at 1675 East Ryan Road in Chandler. I'm also representing the Chandler Airport Commission and Quantum Helicopters, my remarks tonight. Mayor Hartke, council members, and city staff, I would like to address you tonight on the Chandler Municipal Airport Master Plan, on which you will be voting a little later this evening. Kaufman Associates, the company contracted to put together this plan, along with city staff, have worked diligently and gone over and above what's required to ensure that many different groups have had an opportunity to review and have input on this plan. These groups include businesses on and around the airport, stakeholders at the airport, Chandler Chamber of Commerce, various neighborhood associations around the airport, city planners from both the city of Chandler and town of Gilbert, whose airspace is affected around with our airport. Also the FAA and tenants of the airport. And in fact, many of these groups have made suggestions that have been incorporated into this plan. I myself have been involved in the Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee, and I am convinced that this is a good plan, a solid plan, and a plan that will drive the airport positively forward into the future. Working alongside Kaufman Associates and the various committees have been the airport administrative staff. About a year ago, there were some events and changes at the airport. Some of these changes involved city management getting directly involved with the airport operations. In particular, Joshua Wright, acting city manager, and at the time acting airport manager, Stephen Turner, the current acting airport manager, and Ryan Reeves, airport business coordinator. All became very heavily involved in operations at the airport. In that time, there have been marked improvements in airport operations. Emails have been sent and responded to, phone calls have been returned, meetings have been established, and projects that have sat idle for months are now getting done. I can honestly tell you that in the past year, there have been more enthusiasm, more optimism, and a more positive attitude than I have witnessed in the past 22 years that I've worked at the Chandler Airport. I stated a few moments ago that the city, the airport and the city of Chandler's economy is at stake here and in the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would simply like to ask that you support this plan. It is a plan that will develop and will create opportunities. And make no mistake, this is an economic development issue.
Thank
And
you, Stephen.
it deserves nothing less than your full support. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Council, we have, again, a consent agenda before us and one action. At this point, a motion would be appropriate for the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Councilmember Orlando.
thank you, Mayor. I move that we approve the city council regular meeting agenda Thursday, April 22nd, 2021, items 1 through 37, I believe. Yeah, 37.
All right, there is a motion, second with Councilmember Ellis. Council, any comments before we vote? Seeing none, please vote.
Councilmember Ellis. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you, clerk. Item number 38 is photo enforcement. At this point, we'll call the chief up to make a presentation. I do have 4 speaker cards, 2 for and 2 against. And I'll do the fors first, I'll do the against second, and they have 3 minutes each. And council, we will discuss. Chief.
Well, good evening, Mayor, members of council. Last week, I provided you with a memo in response to some questions that you had following my last presentation on April 5th. So what I'd like to do this evening, just highlight some of those responses and also respond to some subsequent questions that I've received since I submitted that memo. And just for review, we presently have 12 intersections in the city that are photo enforced, and some of those intersections have multiple approaches. So we have a total of 17 cameras in our city at this time, and all the cameras have the capability to detect red light and speed. And then each approach is also very clearly marked with speed reader signs and feedback signs, and they are positioned at least 300 feet from the intersection to give all motorists an opportunity to be warned and advise that they are entering an intersection that is monitored by photo enforcement. And some of the questions that were asked, I'll just like to go through right now. The video is recorded, and it's recorded 24/7, and that video is stored for 30 days before it is purged. And then once that information is purged, it is no longer available. The other important aspect is that video recordings may only be retrieved by Chandler Police Vehicle Crimes detectives or the technicians for the vendor with permission from the vehicle crime detectives. And then anytime a video is viewed or accessed, it is digitally recorded, so we can track who is accessing and viewing that video. The data is stored at a secured location off-site. And the other question was asked about how many times a day does one of our employees, our detectives, review the photo violations, and that's about 200 to 300 times a day. They review 200 to 300 violations a day, and it takes about 1.5 to 2 minutes to view those. And the question was asked, what about challenges? Well, the challenge would be the same procedure as if someone received a written citation. They would go to court and have a challenge there. Another question is if the violator, they don't respond to notice of violation, then what happens? We have a contracted process serving vendor, and they make attempts to serve the violation. And if the person lives outside the state, And if they don't respond, then there's no action taken. So there is no process serving outside of the state. Another question was asked about how many times we have rejected tickets. So in 2020, that number is 341 times. And that's actually quite a low number because of the quality assurance that's built in with the current vendor. It is infrequent that a violation has to be rejected. Another question was asked about what factors played into where these cameras were placed. And obviously safety, high excellent locations, and just sheer volume. So those were the two metrics that were used to determine the placement of the cameras. And then each month, the vendor also recalibrates and makes sure that the camera and the speed detectors are working properly. The traffic boards, their speed reader boards were installed over 10 years ago in 2007. And then another question had to do with the cost. And I can talk about the cost for our employee. It's a one full-time employee, and that is a total is $165,000, and that's 100% offset by the revenue that's received. Another question was the difference between how many red light violations occur a year versus speed, and this chart just highlights the numbers. And then there's another question about the flow. And the flow starts when there's a activation. That information then is reviewed by the vendor to make sure that the plate is legible. That information is then passed to our police employee. They match up the MVD date and motor vehicle department data, and they send that information back to the vendor. The vendor then confirms the quality of the pictures, and then they send that back to us on a second time. And that's when the officer ensures that the picture matches, it's legible, and then a citation is issued. So essentially that is the flow. And as far as impact, we very well know that the red light running is a major cause, a leading cause of crashes throughout urban areas in our country, including right here in the Valley and in our city. And we are leveraging technology that allows us to help keep our roadways safe. And it does not replace an officer. This technology augments our staff by providing 24/7 coverage, in essence, at those particular locations where realistically we would never have an officer present 24/7 at those intersections. And it's also part of our overall strategy to enhance traffic safety, and that's through enforcement, education, and engineering. This chart depicts the 5 intersections in 2016 that had photo enforcement. And at that point, we removed photo enforcement from these 5 intersections and placed those cameras at different locations based on new data. But what this chart shows is, if you look at the column on the left, the red light camera only was installed in year 2000, 2001, that fiscal year. And for 7 years, there's only red light cameras at those intersections. And in 2008, they augmented the intersection with speed detection as well. And if you look at the average number of collisions that occurred, they were reduced significantly when the speed component, the second part, was installed. And then in 2016, those cameras were removed from these intersections and placed elsewhere. If you look at the third bar, clearly in each of those intersections, we've seen an uptick in overall collisions. So the trajectory is going the wrong way at the location where we removed the photo enforcement cameras. But another aspect of the program, a significant aspect that's not often talked about, but it's very important, is that over the last 5 years, our detectives have utilized video and photos from our photo enforcement program well over 150 times in different criminal investigations. And just in the last 12 months, we have collected compelling evidence from our cameras that have helped, that have played a significant role bringing 2 homicides to resolution. So that is an area, again, we don't often talk about, but it does play a dual role, and our criminal investigators do depend on our photo enforcement for their evidentiary gathering. So again, this is just a highlight of some of the questions from last time and some of the subsequent questions, and I'd be happy to try to answer any further questions you may have.
Council, any questions for the chief?
Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for that presentation. I don't have a copy of your presentation in front of me, but I'll try to address a couple of questions that I had, how quickly that went through. You had mentioned there were 200 to 300 violations a day. How many of those are false?
Or what?
False. How many are wrong?
Violations or photos?
Either or.
Well, I don't have the total number of activations, but clearly we have around 12, 13,000 citations issued as a result. But I will tell you that there are two types of what they call controllable offenses, meaning when they look at the photo initially, the first time that photo is reviewed. And last year, the vendor had 2,000, just over 2,000, what they call controllable exceptions. So that occurs when there is when a flash is taken, but the flash may not have been strong enough to penetrate the window and the picture isn't particularly clear. So that is something that the vendor controls. So that happened 2,000 times last year, but more so was the uncontrollable or non-controllable exceptions. And that happened about 1,100 times last year. And again, that is when someone may be wearing a face mask, or the picture is not legible, or the sun may be obscuring. So that happens quite a bit, and that happened over 10,000 times last year. So between the controllable and non-controllable, again, that's about 13,000 times last year.
12 to 13,000 times we had errors.
There weren't errors. This is what was taken from this is what the photo saw, and they were vetted out through the process. So not every picture is going to be perfect. There's weather, there's deception, there's a lot of variables that involved. So whether it's non-controllable or controllable, that happened about 13,000 times last year, and that is vetted in the first part of the process before it's passed on to our officers.
So that's just taken out, that's never sent? It's automatically mailed, right?
No. The only thing last year, about just over 12,000 violations were mailed after it had gone through this extensive vetting process, and only after our officer signs off on that citation, which is essentially the same as if an officer pulled someone over, issued them a citation, and the last thing they do is sign that citation. They sign their name. This happens in the exact same way. That officer that's responsible for this program reviews that citation and makes sure it meets all our standards before that officer signs that citation and approves it to be sent to the violator.
Okay. You mentioned that from a process server perspective, really the only ones that are getting fined are people that live in the state or that live in the city of Chandler. Anybody that's from out of town, that's not happening, right?
No, we will serve process within the state,
right?
But we will not serve process from people who are registered out of state.
And who pays for that?
We pay upfront, or the vendor pays upfront, and then we are charged, and then we impose that fine on the violator. So we recoup it on the back end.
I think you said we pay up front, and then you said the vendor pays up front.
No,
is it us?
The vendor pays, and then we recoup that, and then we are charged, and then we recoup that from the violator.
Okay, how much is that? You said it was $20, or no, serving's a lot more than the $20. Every picture that's taken, even of the 13,000 that are rejected, we still get charged, right?
No,
No.
we're only charged $20.70. We are charged $20.70 for every actionable citation.
Yeah. $20.70 for every actionable citation. So, okay.
So when we mail that notice of violation to the, when that notice of violation is mailed to the offender, we are charged at that point, and that has gone through that vetting process.
Okay, so you have an entire FTE that's dedicated to vetting through these camera tickets, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. There are 200 to 300 of those a day. Is that right?
We have a person that looks at the citations that have already been vetted through the vendor. And then when you get to us, about 300 and something times last year, that officer had to reject those for a variety of different reasons. And then the citation is mailed out. So yes, the officer is the final stop to ensure that is a valid citation.
Okay. So you said 341 times that that's all that the vendor rejected from the process, right?
No, the 341 times is all the officer rejected from the
Okay.
process.
So everything pretty much gets mailed out unless it's like pretty egregious. That comes from the vendor.
The only thing that gets mailed out is what our officer approves and signs his name to.
Okay. So in your presentation, you showed a handful of intersections. Now, you also sent some data that showed like our ranking of intersections. What are those intersections that you showed rank as far as safety within the city?
The last presentation,
Yeah.
I believe there's over about 300 intersections in the city, and those were ranked by traffic engineering as their collision rate. So the high collision.
Yeah.
And that's how that was decided.
So one of the things that I thought was interesting is we redid the McQueen and Queen Creek intersection, made it wider, made it more safe, but we put in camera lights anyway. Why did we do that?
Well, one of the variables of how we decide where to place the camera isn't just the number of collisions, but it's also the combination with the volume of traffic. And when you make the road bigger, there are more vehicles that would use it.
Okay. And so what's the total fine that a Chandler resident is fined when they inadvertently run a red light? Like when you add in all the fees for the vendor that we have to pay, the 500 grand for just to be able to have the lights, et cetera.
Yeah, I do have that. It's about $240.
Okay. Okay. I just had a couple more questions. I
Very high
apologize,
speed.
council. I think the biggest point that I wanted to hear you say again, these cameras are surveilling our residents and people from out of town 24/7. And a third-party vendor is keeping that data. Is that correct?
These cameras are operating 24/7, and they are monitoring the traffic the 12 intersections. That is
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? So, Councilmember Rowe.
Yeah, not any real questions. It's a good presentation. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Turn on your mic, please.
Yeah, just a few things that I would share. Photo enforcement, video surveillance, for those folks that want it. You won't have to hold your breath because it's coming more and more every year, and it's going to be more and more intrusive and more intrusive. And at some point, we'll be able to control people's cars, and the system will stop your vehicle before you go through a red light. It maybe even control your speed. And if I talk to Sandeep about technology, because we talk about technology a lot in public safety, we don't have this in place right now, but the truth is, there is technology where we could catch a speeder, electronically send them an email, electronically withdraw money from their bank account, and say, thank you, please don't speed again. But I don't think people want that. But why not? Because there is a threshold. There is a point where people say, we don't want that. We don't want that. The reason we have marked police cars is because the public wants a certain trust. And our public safety knows, our police officers know, that if we didn't have marked police cars, perhaps we would solve more crime. Undoubtedly, we'd solve more crime. In the past couple of years, if folks, you don't have to think back very far to know that we had photo enforcement up and down our interstates, all over Arizona. And our state legislature took the steps to have it all taken out. And why was that a success? Is because people didn't want it. People didn't want it. Now, I know some people still want it. People There's some folks that want it. But I would say that photo enforcement is one of the most contentious things, violations when people go to court. They're more likely to fight that than they are a DUI. And if we talk about these intersections, we're talking about 12 intersections, 17 cameras. It's my calculation that about twice a day, we get a citable offense related to a red light running person. So it's only about twice a day. And in that same period, in a 24-hour period, we're getting 30 to 40,000 crossings at these intersections. So what you really do have is you have a very compliant citizenry that does follow the law. And there are some that don't. And when they don't, and we can send them a ticket or a violation and have them appear, pay a fine, those are people that are lawful registered owners. If someone has a stolen car, they will not be cited. If they have a fictitious license plate, they won't be cited unless it's so redundant that we can investigate that and get somebody and arrest them. There's no opportunity with a red light camera for any community relations. You think that every time a police officer makes a traffic stop, they write people tickets? Oftentimes it's, hi, how are you? Do you know why I stopped you today? And could you provide your identification and your insurance and your registration? And sometimes it's as simple as, hey, would you please slow down? There is no opportunity for that with photo enforcement. The governor of Arizona, Doug Ducey, recently signed a SB 1551 bill regarding civil violations, civil traffic violations. And that will be adopted, I think, within 90 days after the close of the session this year. And that is going to put severe limitations on our courts in enforcing civil traffic violations and getting funds collected and having fines picked up. And I don't know how much revenue the city may lose from that, but I feel that we are going to suffer from that. And I don't know if that's been taken into account when we talk about working with this company, because it sounds like we may end up paying more and losing some of that revenue.
Councilman, was there a question for the chief? Because we're going to.
I had no questions for the
Okay.
chief. I had my conversation. And
Because we're going to have this conversation, but this is specifically, is there a question for the chief? And then we're going to read these cards and then have a
yeah,
chance.
I didn't have any questions.
Okay. Is there anyone else that has a question for the chief? Councilmember Harris? No? Okay.
Mayor. So Chief, just a couple of things here. I understand that I was on the council many, many years ago, and we put this in place, and I've approved this several times, and you and I talked about the business model here and why it makes sense, and I'm satisfied with that. Thank you for taking the time to explain that. I appreciate it. But one of the things that I keep hearing from other folks is that this ticket is gouging. So if a police officer stopped a resident for a red light violation, is the fine any different than if they were caught through photo enforcement?
No, it's the exact same fine.
So there is no markup?
No.
Okay. Then the other question I got was, someone called me the other day and said, council member, there's a lot more intrusiveness in this thing than in that camera. And anybody that has an Alexa at home, there's a lot more intrusiveness in that. Now, I know we decide to do this and we sign off and we do the software update. There's a little thing on there that says we could do cookies, we could do this. And I get there is some some personal acknowledgement. But the bottom line is we're innovation. We have talked about technology helping us, making our lives better and safer. This makes you've proven this over and over and over again. This makes our life safer. So the second question I have for you is calibration. That's a good question. I think people ask, and I think the judges asked at that time too. I know I had a person call me and said that was one of the questions they had in the court case. Are these things calibrated normally on a pretty regular basis?
So each month, the vendor goes out to the intersections and calibrates their equipment.
And if the equipment was found out of calibration, what happens to that ticket?
Well, if the equipment's out of calibration, then that's something that would certainly be appealable in court.
Right. And a person would ask that normal question. This person at least went to court, asked that question, was the last time it was calibrated, and it happened to be calibrated before he got the ticket. So I guess the judge says, no, I'm sorry, I'm not buying that argument. So I got a couple of things I'll say, but I'll hold those over. Thanks.
Council, any other questions for the chief? Councilmember Lopez.
So the 70 cameras and that we have,
17.
17. Have we increased that number over time? I know you showed in the graph that we went from just straight red light catcher and then added the speed.
2007 was the last time we added cameras.
Okay, and so in 2007 we've had 17 cameras since then.
Correct.
And they've only just been shifted around to the respective intersections that have been depicted by traffic to be, again, dangerous and or high volume. Is that correct?
Only in 2016, that was the first time we moved 5 cameras to other locations.
Okay.
So that's happened once.
Okay. Is that something that's done every so often, or is that intended to be, we recalibrate that? Is that a question for you or for traffic?
Something we look at, but obviously there is a cost to that with the vendor as well. But we look at the data, and if it dictates, if it supports moving it to another location, we would do that.
So keep an eye on it, but if as long as we're targeting in the major issue intersections, we're not going to take on an expense to just move 1 or 2. It's gonna be kind of a shift if you
The data
say
supported
demographic.
the shift, we would do that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So Chief, I've got a question just based on a comment by Councilmember Rowe, and maybe we don't know the answer yet, maybe legal does, but with what he had mentioned about the governor signing some bill, what's the impact upon this system, or is it too early to know?
I think it's very premature right now. We simply don't know how things will play out over time.
Okay. All right, good. Council, any other questions for the chief? Otherwise, I'll call our speaker cards up.
I've got just a couple more.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Chief, we pay $500,000 a year, right? To ATS, no matter whoever it is, Redflex now, no matter what, right? We're beholden to that based on a contract. And this contract is for 5 more years. So if council votes yes tonight, no matter what changes with current law or anything like that, we're locked in for $500,000 a year. We just had a big meeting yesterday. You need staff, right? You need people. And I know you mentioned that this augments your staff, but I've heard you've got 1 full-time that's working on this every day. That person could be dedicated directly to traffic to work on troubled spots, and then we could increase our relationship building with our community with those stops. And then you have $500,000 left over. What I saw from your data a few weeks ago was that the net over 10 years was $275,000, and that didn't factor in a couple of other things that costs, benefits, and things. That wasn't staff included. So our staff that you said is $1.6 million over 10 years. So this is actually a cost of doing business, and I get that. But I would rather see those people on the street. So my question for you is, that was more of a speech, but this will be my question. I asked earlier in the week for some data, the raw data on this, and I was told by staff that I needed to get council to agree to give me the raw data. I don't want to do a FOIA request or anything like that, but I really just want to see the raw data too, because some of the data that we were using wasn't congruent with where we have the lights. It didn't match up to the places where you were showing. And I'm not saying it wasn't real. I just wanted to look at the data myself. And I was told that from time and some other things, I couldn't have that. Can I have that data, that raw data? And does it come from the vendor or does it come from us?
It would come from traffic engineering raw data. But to answer your question, it was regarding this particular slide. And this slide contains the 5 intersections that were removed. So they were not
Okay.
part of that information that was provided. 'Cause
Okay.
We're looking at contemporary information, and these locations were not included in that because they no longer exist.
These are the ones where we move the traffic lights.
2016.
Okay. Got it. And so how are those doing now?
Well, as I indicated earlier, we've had an uptick each year since they were removed.
We've had so when were the light, where you do the speed, we have the radar, were those put up on those intersections like they were on the sites with the,
I think they were all installed.
I'm talking about the ones that announce, they're not camera lights, they're the ones that say, hey, you're going
Correct.
47 on McQueen, not 45 like you should, because I don't
Yeah,
speed.
I do have that. It's been over 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I believe it was also 2007.
Can I just get the raw data
Yeah.
from,
Excuse me?
can I get the raw data from,
I will work with traffic engineering and
thank you.
certainly
All right.
help with that.
Mayor, just a quick question. Just to follow up, the part of the resolution that we did back then, that time, was that the money we generate would go towards safety issues. That camera lights or the speeding, the signal lights, that was a part of the investment back, street signage. There was other things we did for safety.
That is correct. And we've
Perhaps
also-
we should be sharing that as well, because that's really what we did. We're putting this money back into the community for safety reasons, and that was a part of the motion.
And whatever revenue is generated above expenses is only earmarked for either police enforcement or traffic engineering. So whether it's the variable messaging signs or it's the portable radars we put in neighborhoods when we get complaints, all that equipment has been helped funded through revenue generated from the program.
So it's not like we're putting this in our pocket, right? I mean, this is being dispersed back out in the community. So not only you got a safer intersection, you're now providing other safety tools throughout the community. It's paying for this. It's being paid by.
That is correct.
So Chief, look, I don't want to belabor this, but since we're talking about personnel, you got one person that is actually looking at 12,000 citations a year, right? Roughly. How many officers would that take?
It would take quite a bit.
I know, that's my point. So really, I mean, I get that. So we're putting the money back into safety. We're putting more police officers on the street for other things that they could be doing. And we're actually putting safety measurements in the community, and it's not costing us anything. It's costing the bad guy and gal that are breaking the law, period. I think it's a great opportunity. I supported it then and I support it now. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor.
I wish you wouldn't refer to me as the bad guy. And our
I'm
other
sorry,
council
Mayor.
members up here. but-
I've gotten them too, Mayor.
Mayor, to be fair, it's
Vice
not
Mayor.
revenue. You're fining our residents. We are fining our residents at a very high rate. And so we shouldn't call it revenue, but I get your point. Thankfully, former council member and current state representative Jeff Winiger initiated that, where the money had to be poured back into. We've used it actually to make bigger signs at these intersections so people would be safer. It's been shown on numerous occasions that those radar signs that show you how fast you're going actually slow people down a little bit at these intersections. And those have all been put up at these intersections. So I don't want to say this earlier, but I'll just say it since it seems like we're going to do this, that those things may be a contributor to the lower incidence of accidents at those locations. It could be a combination of everything. That's the thing about these red light cameras and these speed cameras. We don't know. The data can be manipulated in any way, which is the reason that I wanted to get the data. At the end of the day, I would rather have more bodies on the streets. I know Councilmember Orlando and the rest of council talked about that at nauseum yesterday. Not at nauseum. We did it because it's the right thing to do. But we are fleecing money from our residents with automated cameras, and that's not revenue. Thank you.
So again, comments to the chief. We're not in a debate mode up here yet, but Councilmember Ellis.
Hold to that.
Thank you, Chief. The reason why I wanted to weigh in a little bit is from the psychological point of view of knowing that you have a camera in that corner coming from that point of view, for me, I think it's all about a safety issues. People's behaviors are changed based on the things that they expect that's going to happen to them. Um, Anytime we want behavior to change, we have to modify that behavior in one way or another. And to me, a photo camera standing in a corner, it's a modifier. It modifies that behavior because when you come in close to it, your GPS is telling you approaching a camera, automatically you slow down. I will full disclosure. I probably was one of those bad actors that you mentioned, or however, because it happened to me a couple of times. I'm distracted, something's happening, I'm coming, and I bypass it for some reason, once or twice. But the fact of the matter is, safety is very important. Anytime you lose someone in an accident in a corner like this, it stays with you for the rest of your life. This is not something to take lightly. I know how many do we have to die in a corner like that for us to say this is we need to use it, or it's not a invasion of privacy, or whatever else it could be.
Yeah.
For
So,
me, at this time, I think
yeah,
it is a safety issue.
yeah. So Council, again, if there's no more questions of the chief, I'm going to ask him
I
to
do have one more
sit
question,
down.
Mayor.
Okay.
So if I remember correctly, when we did the moves in 2016, did we leave the speed indicator signs where they previously were and put new ones in? Or
I
did we
believe
move
so.
those?
We have speed indicator signs at other intersections beyond the photo enforced intersections, but I would have to defer that to traffic engineering.
Okay. Yeah, because we have in a couple of school zone areas, and
We have them
I
at-
know we've done
beyond
that,
the
but
photo
I'm trying
enforcement
to
program.
remember, unfortunately, because of not having to go around
And
the
those
city as much
indicators were funded through
through
Got it.
these activities. Yep. Okay, thank you.
All right. Again, questions. We'll get a chance to talk.
I'm gonna just ask,
Councilmember Harris.
thank you, Mayor. Um, Chief, have accidents went down since these cameras have been placed wherever where they're placed at?
We have shown on average a decrease in accidents from the high prior to the cameras being installed.
Okay. And then have you seen, has there been less speeding tickets since these cameras been up?
Yeah, I can't speak to that because we've only had the cameras for the last 10 years or so. So I don't have that information and I don't want to misspeak.
Is the taxpayers at a loss in terms of this program? Is the taxpayers paying out of their pocket to keep this program up?
Taxpayers contribute to the entire city's operations, and this is one aspect of what the city provides.
Right. And with the contract that we have, I mean, we're paying like over $1 million over 5 years. I know how the revenue works, but I'm saying, aren't we at a loss as a city?
Each year varies. So sometimes we may have a variance and a positive variance, and sometimes it may be negative. But over the course of the life of the program, there's been a slight positive cash flow or positive revenue over the course of the program. So overall, we have not lost money, but we have not made significant. We have not made that much money either. And the money that is, when I said made money, the revenue that is generated in a positive flow is pushed back into the system.
Thank you, Mayor.
So it is a thin margin.
All right. Thank you, Chief. I've got, as I mentioned, 4 speaker cards. First, I want to call up Rick Human. Rick, you know the drill. State your name and address. You have 3 minutes.
Mayor, members of the council, I sat on that same dais twice approving the photo radar. I heard some of the same kinds of things, that we need a police officer in every corner and they'll be generous to the person, whatever. Driving is a privilege. It is not a right. It does not sit in the Constitution like the Second Amendment. You drive, you get a license to drive. You break the law, which we set up, there's a fine. It's about safety. Councilman Ellis hit it right on the head. You know, when we reduce accidents on a corner, we save somebody's life. If you break the law, with Councilmember Winiger and myself, Councilmember Orlando, we added the speed boards to slow people down. We changed the lights, the yellow light to 4.5 seconds. You have plenty of time to stop. You choose not to. You run the light, you gas it. We've got the countdowns on the walk signs now so people can slow down. You get a ticket, it's your own fault. It's not about fleecing the public. You have a privilege to drive. You pay insurance for that. When we have more accidents in our city, our insurance rates go up. Get an actuary in here to talk about insurance rates. In cities that have high accident rates, your insurance goes up. That's fleecing the public? I don't know. We all pay for that kind of a situation. So we need to take a strong look at what we're doing. We've added all these different features in here to make the public aware. If you slow down, you're paying attention. Get off your phone. Why did we have to have a law now, no texting and driving? Why? Because a police officer was killed on the 101. It finally took that before we put that law into effect. So when you think about this and you say, let's get rid of the cameras, an officer can stop somebody. I've ridden with police officers. Yes, they stop people. They can give a ticket, not give a ticket. That happens. But this is another tool in the toolbox, like the chief said. So remember this, if we pull these cameras out, and as the chief showed, accident rates have gone up. That mother, father, sister, brother, or children who don't have a parent coming home that night because somebody was lazy and ran a red light and killed somebody, think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, I have Barbara Hoffman. Again, Barbara, state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Barb Hoffman, and I live at 4114 East Sourwood Drive in Gilbert. I work in traffic safety, and I spent a lot of time in Chandler, so that's why my interest is here. I wrote you all an email yesterday, and I hope you all read it. It doesn't sound like you all understood it, but I decided I was going to tell a quick story. Maybe this would emphasize how I feel. This is called My Last Day on Earth by the late Michael David Allenson, Forever 14. I never thought today would be my last day on Earth. I woke up startled, feeling the wet tongue of a puppy licking my eyelids. When I remembered that my dad bought me a new puppy, I calmed down. Bad news hit my family recently. My older sister, Jen, was in a rollover crash on her way home from Mexico, and she broke many bones and she had bleeding in her brain. I rode my scooter over to my mom's house to watch a movie with my sister, and she fell asleep. I got up to leave, but I felt the need to hug my sister, maybe because we were actually getting along for the first time. I leaned over and hugged her in her hospital bed that was located in my mom's living room. I looked up and saw my mom smiling. She liked it when we got along. She asked me to stay for pizza, but I had to get back to my dad's house to feed my puppy. I headed out. When I got to the intersection, my light was red. And then the light turned green, so I started pulling forward, and I got a nod from the SUV driver on my left because they were going to make a right turn, so they told me that I could proceed. I took off in the proper crosswalk, and wham, out of nowhere, a car hits me. I screamed out in pain, and I flew up in the air. My scooter shattered into pieces, and I fell really hard to the burning hot asphalt. Immediately, I saw a white light, and I followed it to a more peaceful place. Looking down from my new heavenly home, I saw my next door neighbor, who happened to be at that intersection, running to my body. She was screaming my name. A few people called 911 immediately. Ambulance, police, and fire came. Paramedics tried working on me, and my neighbor drove off to tell my mom what had happened. I realized then that I was hit and killed by an elderly man who ran a red light. In my new realm, I could see things in many places, and I watched my neighbor knocking on my mom's door. And my mom left with her, and soon they arrived at the intersection, and my mom got out of the car and ran to the crash scene. She wanted to see me, but the police wouldn't let her. I was bleeding badly out of my head, and they worked on me for a long time, but they couldn't do much. Two men walked over to my mom, who was sitting on the curb, and they told her that they couldn't save me. I watched my mom dialing her cell phone to call my dad at work. She told him that I was hit by a car and that they couldn't save me, and I heard my dad yelling, "No, no, no." My mom headed home. As she knew she had to tell my sister what had happened. They cried and hugged, even though my
Barbara,
sister, like,
if you could just finish up.
yeah, it's
Mayor.
almost done.
Mayor, can I have a point of privilege? Let her finish. This is.
Yes. My dad and grandparents and neighbors in the fire department came to my mom's house and I watched them make calls. My grandfather, who's normally a strong person, was laying on the floor sobbing. One tragic mistake by a driver who ran a red light devastated many lives that day, especially mine. I will never get to graduate high school, go to college, marry, have children. He took away my future. So please stop on red. And Mayor and Council, I please hope that you vote yes to keep cameras in order to deter red light running and to save lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker card is Sean Dow. Sean, again, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Sean Dow, I live at 1520 Bumblebee Lane. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about it. Mr. Mayor, 12 years ago, I came here to Chandler and moved here, and I saw my first photo radar flash. As I had just left the military, I dove for the side of the road thinking that it was a roadside bomb. I also came into this council chamber and sat next to the convicted felon Aaron Rosenberg as he sold you on this bright flash at intersections was going to make the intersections more safe. I have emailed you, Mayor, and your council members, study after study proving that these cameras bright flash in the middle of an intersection, the most dangerous part of the road, is making more crashes. In Pinal County, fatalities doubled when they installed these cameras, and that's why they ripped them out. You want to know why the cameras were ripped off of the freeway? I can tell you why, because I played the part in doing it. That's my job. I go around and destroy photo radar camera programs. I started right here in Chandler. Would you like to know the photo radar camera company executives that have gone to prison that worked right here in Chandler? Because I can give you that list of names. Redflex CEO Karen Finley went to prison for 10 years for bribing officials in 19 states, including here in Arizona. So did her accomplice, who testified that he bribed Arizona politicians, including, that's Aaron Rosenberg, who stood here right where I'm standing and sold you this bill of goods. So did the mayors of Crestwood, Illinois, St. Peters, Missouri, and so did the Illinois Transportation Committee chairman. So did the top aide to the Cook County commissioner. So did the Dallas County school superintendent and the president. So did the Dallas County city councilman. So did a Texas judge. So did a Washington, D.C. police officer. Everywhere these cameras are installed, crime follows. These cameras cause more accidents. What you did, Mayor, by widening these 5 roads and improving the yellow light time is what truly saves lives. We've seen it all over the country. You increase these yellow light times by 1 second, and you will see accidents drop like they did in Georgia, where they saw a 49% decrease in accidents just by adding 1 second. The vast majority of the tickets that Chandler issues are wrong. 52% according to the East Valley Tribune, and of the ones that are prosecutable, 25 are dismissed outright. No police officer in this town would tolerate another police officer pulling over 75% of the people in Chandler and issuing wrong tickets. 22,000 people are having to go to court and fight these tickets because of this vendor. You need to get rid of these criminals and get rid of them. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker card is Paul Pavlich. Again, sir, you have 3 minutes. State your name and address.
Thank you guys for having me. So my name is Paul Pavlich. I live at 1313 East Tyson Street. Tonight, the council is voting to extend the photo radar contract in Chandler for $2.5 million over 5 years. I encourage you to vote to not extend the contract. I acknowledge that there are numerous studies supporting as well as discouraging their use to reduce traffic accidents of varying severities. However, one of the most extensive studies on this subject demonstrates no significant safety value. The peer-reviewed study by economics professor Dr. Justin Gallagher was published in the Scientific American, and the abstract of the study states, quote, "We find that the cameras change the composition of accidents, but no evidence of a reduction in total accidents or injuries," unquote. Findings from the study were generated using hundreds of thousands of geocoded police accident data collected over a period of 12 years. Tonight's agenda states, quote, studies conducted in Chandler show that there's a statistically significant reduction in accidents at intersections that are photo enforced, unquote. Why are these studies and data not available on Chandler's traffic management website for public review and third-party assessment? I understand accidents and injuries are only one factor and that there is a revenue component associated with cameras. However, per tonight's meeting agenda, quote, the goal of the photo enforcement program is to reduce overall accidents and further reduce the severity of accidents that do occur, unquote. This implies the program is to promote safety, not revenue generation. However, based on the data, the statement is dubious. In 2011, former Chandler Vice Mayor Jack Sellers expressed the same concern, saying in reference to the program that, quote, I guess I get concerned when it has the appearance of being a revenue generator rather than a safety measure, unquote. Councilman Orlando at the same time questioned why the city would have to pay the operating company for unsuccessful tickets, stating, quote, we seem to have a burden of the cost, unquote. Paradise Valley was forced to refund over 1,000 citations after being accused of shortening the duration of its yellow light cycle to maximize red light tickets issued. Not something Chandler is engaged in, I hope. My question is, does the administrative burden and cost justify retaining this program? Speaking of the operating company, prior to 2016, the city of Chandler contracted Redflex to operate the cameras. In 2017, Redflex settled a $20 million bribery scheme to the city of Chicago. Former CEO was sentenced to 30 months of federal prison in order to pay $2 million in restitution for conspiracy to commit bribery in several states. The former Redflex vice president alleged the company routinely used bribery in other states, including Arizona. The city now contracts Vera Mobility, formerly known as American Traffic Solutions, which as recently as November 2020 was sued in a class action lawsuit for, quote, unfair practices that harm consumers, unquote. I see a common theme among these contractors. Does the city of Chandler audit our suppliers or have other safeguards in place to ensure taxpayers don't become the next victim of predatory practices? It should also be noted that the criteria for an actionable activation in Exhibit B of the contract is very weak and easily exploitable. Effectiveness, financial, and operational concerns aside, these cameras are unconstitutional and violative of citizens' rights to privacy and their right to face their accuser. The National Motorist Association agrees with this opinion, as does the Supreme Court of Missouri. I reject the idea that citizens must give up our privacy to accommodate this technology. Red light cameras and speed cameras are prohibited across the country in various states. The $2.5 million taxpayer dollars for this project should be spent on strategically placed speed readers or other constitutional enforcement mechanisms that we know work. Sources and references are available in this document that I can email you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Can we get a report on his question and get back to him about how we audit the companies that do the what's it called, ATS, or who is it now? I know they changed their name. Vera Mobility. Yes, thank you.
So council, you know, again, I know this is a emotional issue. I know there are people here that believe in this. I know that there are people here that think that this is a violation of rights. I think we all get it. I think there is, at the end of the day, I think we're going to vote, and people are going to vote as they look at these issues. So I'm going to ask, is there a motion? And then we can certainly continue the conversation before we vote.
Mayor,
Councilmember Orlando.
thank you. I move to approve agreement number PD 5-96-3521, Amendment 1 with the American Traffic Solution Inc. doing business at Vera Mobility for photo enforcement. Do I need to read the rest of it, or that's the motion, right? Okay.
All right. So council, there is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All right,
Indeed.
motion and a second. Comments? Why don't we
Me?
start on one end and go
Oh.
to the other? Let's start with Councilmember
Harris.
I got it. Come
It's
on.
getting late. Well, first of all, tonight we dealt with some very powerful testimonies. Some of those testimonies I really would like to look further into. I would like to know more behind the scenes, how we got this contract, how it came to the city of Chandler. There's some discrepancies in terms of how it even got here based on other scrupulous activities that was going on. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the yellow light that was 1 second could make a big difference. I would like to look further into that. And I'm more concerned about the fact that there's the surveillance that happens when, you know, as a third party is surveilling our city in and out and being able to keep looking at that data. And so I didn't get a chance to go further into it, but I'm very concerned about those things, and I'll wrap it up. And so what I would like to do is look further into it. But nevertheless, I had an overwhelming amount of emails that came in from this, and it came from the community. There was 39 that supported this, and there was 4 that opposed it. I would like to put these emails into the record, and because of the emails and because the community of Chandler seems to desire this over my personal beliefs, I'm going to vote to keep this. I'm going to, I'm going to vote. I'm going to support keeping the red cameras in. Thank you.
So I understand both sides, and I can appreciate, Councilmember Stewart and Councilmember Rowe's concerns on some of the overreach of government, and I can agree with that, and I concur that sometimes there is a slippery slope. But to me, it does come down to the safety of the intersections. It comes down to the data, and it was mentioned a few other locations, and again, a nationwide study that was done. But I look at ourselves, and I look at what happens in our city, and we have proof. And when we reviewed these in 2016, to me, it was very, very blatant that by moving these cameras in those intersections, it had an immediate effect on the number of accidents, the intensity of accidents, and the deaths. So to me, by the data, that means that we're saving lives out there. It's one of the tools in the toolbox. I'm not for expanding this. This is one of those where I think we do target. It's a tool to be able to use to target specific intersections that are high risk, high volume, and leave it at that. And leave this as one of the tools of many that our police have to help keep us safe while we're out on the roads. So that's why I'll be voting for it.
Motion to table this till you have more information?
There's a motion and a
There's a
second
motion.
here that has to be voted on.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion, if this is truly about safety.
There's a
Can I-
motion and a second that has to be voted on before another motion would be made.
Can I make an amendment to the?
You
to-
didn't make the motion or the second, so city attorney,
Mayor, yes, there is a motion and second that has to be voted on unless it's withdrawn. You can make a motion to amend. It doesn't have to be moved by the mover or seconder, but that proposed amendment has to be seconded before it can be voted on.
Thank you. So I'd like to make a motion to amend this. Well, actually, probably 2 motions. I'd like to amend it until we get more information about some of the questions that Councilmember Harris has. I'd also like to, if this is truly about safety, I think it'd be important to amend this motion, possibly to a referendum. And let's find out what the city feels about it, and maybe in our next election, or we can let the Chandler community decide. But the motion that I'd like to make is, can we issue our citizens a warning first, and make this not about revenue, and make this more about safety? And if that's truly what we're trying to accomplish here, I don't want to take the lazy route of not making sure that we have safe intersections, but I want to make sure that if we're going to leave the cameras in place, that Chandler residents, or any resident for that matter, gets a warning first, right? I think that that's the right thing to do in this case. It looks like it looks like it's going to move forward, but I'd like to make a motion to do that.
so let me be clear. There's, again, you can make one amendment per motion. You cannot make multiple amendments. There's only one allowed per motion according to our rules here. So your amendment is to have a warning go out on the first time that someone is cited.
Mhm.
So that would be the second time in, I'm just.
No,
trying to
no.
grab
If you go through a red light and you get and you accidentally get a ticket, and this is about safety and prevention and behavior, that the first time it happens, they get a warning.
Okay, first time, whatever.
Mhm.
Okay. Is there, is a city attorney, is that an acceptable amendment?
The original motion is to approve the contract or not approve the contract. My recommendation is to vote on the original motion And then if Vice Mayor Stewart wants to make an additional motion to have a warning issued first, I think that should be treated separate from the original motion. Because they're unrelated in the fact that one's dealing with contract and one's dealing with process.
Okay. All right.
So table that discussion till after the vote?
Correct.
Okay. So I appreciate your reaching out to the community. I know that you reached out and asked for affirmational emails, and that's probably why you got the number that you got. And I respect that. And that's reaching out to the community and doing this, but I don't think it's fair to introduce that here. Just fair. You can do anything you want, but it's not fair to introduce that here. I didn't necessarily do that. I invited one gentleman to come speak on behalf. The police chief had almost 10 minutes to speak in favor of this. The opposition, which would be me and one other person, had about 3 to 5 minutes to talk about it. So I guess what I want to share is that it's about safety and trust. We have a huge trust issue right now with our police. And the last thing that we need to do is do things that are untransparent. And I think having the ability for our police department to communicate with our residents that make a mistake and not fine them every time they go through a red light is a good thing in my book. I think there's a bunch of constitutional violations with this, and ultimately I'll be voting no on this simply because I don't believe it fits within the parameters and the framework of what we want Chandler to be, which is a transparent community. So thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to reserve as mayor for last comments. But Councilmember Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. I hate for this to be contentious because people have their beliefs on both sides of this subject, and some don't care, but people care deeply and are committed. I would say that somehow along the way, police officers drifted a little bit away from peacekeepers to enforcers. But there's been real efforts on behalf of our police department and our chief to try and change that with community relations, coffee with a cop. Our chief goes out and attends many things in the community. And I just, look, the general public does not want this. There are many great cities across the state of Arizona that do not have this, and they have safe streets and safe roadways. And I wouldn't call into question their safety. And so I would not support it. Thank you.
Councilmember Ellis.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sitting here tonight thinking about someone is not gonna get their loved ones home because someone hit them into the a red light happened. An accident happened in an intersection right down by my house on McQueen and Queen Creek. And I have seen it happen again, over and over again. It is not possible for us to leave here tonight thinking that this has nothing to do with safety. This only have to do with revenue or anything else that we would like to attribute it to. My main point, again, I'm going to say, anytime we want to change behavior, we're going to attribute something to it that's going to force the person to change that behavior. I understand the fact that we're going to be talking in a little bit about trying to send a warning to someone. If I know that I'm going to run a red light and all I'm going to get is a warning, then there's no reason why I shouldn't run it if I want to. I am not trying to be difficult by saying tonight that it is imperative that we think about those parents or those husbands and wives and children that are losing their loved ones at those intersections. I was one of the first people that says to our lawyer, should I abstain from this because I have gotten a ticket? And and Councilmember Lopez looked at me and said, "No, you can't, because you are elected by the residents in this city to vote on those kinds of matters." And tonight, I want to exercise that vote. And I want to do it for a mother. I want to do it for a father, and I want to do it for a child, a grandmother, and anyone who have ever lost someone in an intersection. My vote is going to be yes.
Councilmember Orlando.
Thank you, Mayor. There's not much more I could say other than, I'm looking at this from purely a safety effort. And I've been consistently looking at the safety effort. The statistics, we could argue what the one thing versus the other statistics. There's liars, damn liars in their statistics. So we could sit here all night long and discuss statistics and get the data. And I think it's fair for council members to get the data. That's an obligation. I have no problem with that. But I think the important thing here is safety. I do have a question. I don't want to lead my fellow council member here down the road, because city attorney, I have a question on what you just talked about. If we approve this tonight, that's a contract, correct? It's a contract, right?
Mayor, if I may, council member, yes, it is.
And the verbs and nouns in that contract are binding.
That is correct. And as I'm rethinking my statement earlier,
All
you're
right.
right. It would, I don't,
We can't change the contract. And
we're
where's
voting
the-
on the contract presented.
Right,
yes.
where's the leverage we have to say, oh, by the way, just go ahead and give them a warning? There's no leverage there. So I just want to make sure, I don't want to leave our council member, because I love Mark Stewart, he's a great guy. I don't want to leave him astray, because that may not happen. Even if we do vote to say, do a warning, it doesn't mean the vendor's going to do it.
Mayor, if I may, council member Orlando, you are absolutely correct, and I do owe an apology to Vice Mayor Stewart as I've stopped to think this through. I think you're absolutely correct. You are voting on a contract. The process is in the contract. So,
Point of order though on that. The process is in the police
Council
officer
member?
issuing the citation.
So would you like to say something?
Sorry, Mayor. I got jumped in there. Sorry.
It's all right.
Too excited. But the process is in the citation issue of the officer. The contract is to set up for the cameras, to set them to send the citation. Again, what the chief just told us is the police officer that reviews the 200 to 300 a day, they're the ones that issue the citation. So that process is in our hands, not in the contract, that we can tell the police chief, say, for the next month issue or whatever it may be, which I don't know how that would be happening, but again, that is the process. Because correct me if I'm wrong, chief, we're the ones that decide whether the citation goes out or not,
Yep,
or whatever goes out, if anything.
and Mayor, if I may, Councilmember Lopez, I don't know what the exact process is for the contract. This was an amendment to an existing contract. I guess what I want to come down to, and I apologize, I don't like to waffle in front of you all, but I guess I am tonight, and I apologize. But I think that if Vice Mayor Stewart wants to proceed with the motion about first citations merely being warnings, if we could just have that caveat, to make sure it complies with the contractual obligations we have, we can definitely pursue that and look at that. If that makes sense.
And again, let me let Councilmember Orlando finish. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Okay. So let me ask a question on that. So really, it's not an amendment to a motion. If there is any council member has the ability to bring something up, and I would suggest that there might be some more research necessarily in this, but any council member, as Councilmember Orlando has the ability to bring something up for discussion or action, and that can be vetted and voted on by council. So, but what is before us right now is a contract. And I'm going to vote yes on this because I do believe it is a safety issue. And I heard our gentleman that sat to the left. I heard a mom who lost her son. And I've been working with that mom who lost her son on Red Means Stop, as probably most of us on this council have. And we certainly respect that. The end of the day for me is I honestly believe and that this is going to make our streets safer. And at the end of the day, I think that is something I owe my community. Is I don't see it as a violation. I've gotten red light tickets. I should have gotten one the other day. I was in a hurry. There wasn't a light at this. I 100% deserved it. I'll be honest with you, and I know that. So I'm going to be voting yes on this. And council, at that point, I'm going to ask if we would vote.
Mayor, can I make the amendment to make it a fine only and change the contract to make it a fine only? And here's why. We have an inordinate amount of red light cameras in our less affluent areas of Chandler, and I just don't think it's fair.
So city, I had already asked for people to vote. Again, this is the contract and we're just discussing the contract. What we do with that is something else. So council, please vote.
Motion carries by majority with Vice Mayor Stewart and Councilmember Rowe
All right.
dissenting.
And Councilmember Stewart, similar to what you previously asked, I would suggest if you, in the actions of vision and policy, would like to look at the process and work with our police and see alternatives, that would be the appropriate thing. It's not an amendment to the contract as stated, but is there amendment to the process? And that's a further conversation that I would suggest that more work be done if that's something that you would like to pursue. So, all right, council, that finishes our consent in action. Is there any unscheduled public appearances tonight before us, clerk?
Mayor Hartke, no, I haven't received any unscheduled public appearances.
All right. That then brings us to current events, which I'll start. So council, on Monday, we heard the Chandler Air Park area plan public. We had a public meeting. And tonight we approved this airport master plan update, and we're continuing to work on the development plan in the surrounding area. The Chandler Air Park area plan, CAAP, guides future land use decisions for the 9 square miles surrounding the airport to offer a great opportunity for economic development within the city. And the city has retained a consultant to gather feedback from the community and make a recommendation to the city council regarding an update to this plan. So based upon community input, the consultant has drafted alternative land use maps. I do want to invite council and our community to attend a virtual meeting to review proposed changes from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Thursday, April 29th, so a week from tonight. The airport is an important economic engine for the entire community, and our community input is vital to future planning. So please, if you would help us get the word out, make sure that we have excellent community input. With that, Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. This week is Volunteer Week. This week is National Volunteer Week, actually. And each council member had the pleasure of surprising the winners of Chandler's Volunteer Recognition Awards. These volunteers made an incredible impact in our community over the past year. I was so happy to be a part of honoring them. I got to surprise the multitasking maestro, Iran Quran, with the American Muslim Women's Association. From her role as a treasurer to managing the educational scholarship program to providing interest-free auto loans, she truly is a multitasking maestro. Check out our video that released today on the city's social accounts and read more about the stories of all our award winners on the city's website. Thank you.
Before I turn to Councilmember Lopez, I just want to give kudos to Council One for being involved with this, but some of you may not know is it was the council here that first financed these volunteer awareness events. And when we didn't have a funding stream, I went to retiring council members that didn't use all their travel expenses, and they actually paid for the banquets and the first recognitions of these for probably the first 4 years. So thank you, council, for continuing to be involved, but really in getting this whole thing started. So, Councilmember Lopez.
Yes, to that point, Mary, and those volunteers around our city, hundreds of thousands of hours, and it's just a force multiplier in keeping our community engaged and a great city to keep living and working in. I also wanted to give an extra shout out to the Public Works and Utilities Director and staff tonight. Earlier this week, we congratulated 2 staff members who have been recognized nationally for their hard work. Tonight, we approved an innovative partnership with Intel that will supplement current reclaimed water supplies. This added supply will have many benefits, including the ability to meet growing demands and enhancing the wildlife habitats at Veterans Oasis Park. These are just a few instances that exemplify the talent and innovative leaders that we have part in our team here in Chandler. Thank you to the Public Works and Utilities team for continuing to create innovative ways to best serve our community and to prepare us for our future. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for all the input tonight as it relates to the camera enforcement program. As you all know, it's kind of dear to my heart. It's something that I ran on 4 years ago that I think it's important that we get rid of. So I appreciate the cordial and polite discussion. That's what I respect the most about being in Chandler. It's a wonderful thing that we are able to do that and do it respectfully. So thank you very much. I just want to thank our police force for the recent news about having a 10-year low in our most violent crimes. That's a remarkable feat in spite of every effort or every challenge that's been put in front of them over this past year and the 9 years prior. It's incredible. And I know that wasn't on my list of things to talk about tonight, but I just wanted to reiterate how thankful, on behalf of the community, how thankful we are. Thank you.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I want to also say the same thing, and that we all got along, we all talked our way through that, and the vote decides it, and we move on, and that's the way to do it. I'd also say that, O.D. Harris, not to steal your thunder, you did your deal, and that was good, but I do want to point out that Sue Mayo, the mother of our own Kevin Mayo, received the Sunbeam Award for her volunteer work at Ascend, and I was pleased as punch to go and make that award, and she was surprised and humble and awesome, just like Kevin's mother would be. So anyway, congratulations to her, and that is all I have. Thank you.
And please tell us later how pleased Punch is.
Pleased as punch.
Yeah. So. Councilmember Ellis.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, as I stated in the beginning of the month, April is Diversity Month, and Chandler, we love to celebrate diversity all year long. It is a time to recognize and celebrate the beauty of our unique cultures here in Chandler. Our backgrounds and traditions are really upheld, and everybody really enjoys come together. One thing that I really was part of is Miss Kim Moyer. I don't see her here, but she was the one who took me for a presentation, actually a tour of the Celebration Plaza, which I had never been to, right down the street from my house. So I had an opportunity to go there and experience it. I love it. I love what is being done there. And one of our own, former Mayor Payne, is also celebrated there. He has a big plate, and every other ones that I looked at, they were all people who really did something great here in Chandler. So I'm excited about that place. As the first Black mayor in Chandler, and he was an educator and influencer, his voice was really heard throughout our city. He embraces diversity and really empower many of us to continue to live that life of diversity here in Chandler. I'm looking forward to continue that legacy that he has started with us when it comes to diversity here in our city. And I'm encouraging everybody who's listening right now to really take a little trip and go down to that Celebration Plaza and get to visit it and see what a great thing that we're doing. And don't forget also to nominate some people. I'm thinking about a couple of people that I'm going to nominate. So thank you.
And as I heard Councilmember Lopez say, on May 15th, we will be inducting the next round of those who will be there.
That's correct.
So join us at 9 a.m.
9 a.m. and I will be there, and everybody needs to be there. You will not regret it. It's going to be another one of our mighty men here in Chandler who's going to be recognized.
Councilmember Orlando.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Okay. Acting City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just a couple quick announcements. I know we're all ready to go home from a long day, but I did want to just recognize again the efforts of our team at the airport on the airport master plan the council approved tonight. As some of you know, before becoming your acting city manager, I was the acting airport manager for about 6 months, so I was very involved with this project. But we had a stellar team that really worked very hard to put this together over the last year and a half, and I think it's one of the bolder airport plans that we've done, and will certainly contribute to the economic development here in Chandler. So just wanted to, again, thank Mr. Smith and Chandler Air Service, but also Chris Andres, our airport planning administrator, Ryan Reeves, our airport business coordinator, is here tonight. Stephen Turner is our current acting airport manager. Our team from CAPA was very involved in that project as well. And also, although he left early, Dave Sperling, who's the chairman of the Chandler Airport Commission, was a very strong voice and leader on this project from beginning to end. So just wanted to thank them publicly for their efforts. This is a big step forward. Finally, just wanted to remind council, we have had many council meetings this week, and I appreciate all your time and effort spent here working on these important issues. But tomorrow is your last council meeting for the week, so 8:15 tomorrow morning here for the all-day budget briefing. We look forward to seeing you in just a few hours. All right, thank you.
All right. And with that, that concludes our meeting.